Hi, 7th graders. Today we're going to do section 11.3, which deals with addition of integers. Now, remember, integers can be positive and negative. So we are now getting into learning how to add those together. You started it in 6th grade, and we're going to review, and hopefully by the end of the section, you'll be very secure in this step of math because it's very important for the rest of your high school math career. So, adding integers, we're going to deal with positive and negative integers and adding numbers that are both negatives, adding numbers that are both positive, and at the end we're going to start adding together numbers that are positive and negative together. Now, if you notice in your book is going to talk about taking the absolute value of the number, adding them together, and then using the sign. The absolute value makes it confusing. Just remember that the absolute value is simply making the number always positive. So here is how I explain to do things. You've been adding integers all along since you were in kindergarten, okay? You've always been adding the positive. 6 plus 2 we know is 8, okay? You're basically taking the positive number, just looking at the number 6 and the number 2 and adding them together and you get 8. Well, the same thing is with our negatives here, okay? Our book says take the absolute value of it, and the absolute value of a -1 is a positive 1, and the absolute value of a -3 is a positive 3. So then we add them together. 1 plus 3 is 4, and then we have to look back for the sign, okay? What I tell the kids to do is don't worry about the signs. In a sense, we're doing the absolute value, but it's not using the scary term absolute value. Just simply look at the number. Don't look at the sign in front of it at all. So I've got a 3 and I've got a 1 there. Add those numbers together. 3 plus 1 is 4. Once I'm done adding it, then I go back and look at what the sign is. Here, it is both negative, so I know my answer has to be -4. So in a sense, what I'm telling you is by just looking at the number is we are actually doing the absolute value. Okay, so let's think this through. I'm going to put on my board here. Ooh, markers. Okay, I've got negatives on this side and positives on this side. Okay, now if I add 2 things plus another positive, let's say 4 things, that would be 4. How many sticks here do I have in the positive side? I count them all up, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and my final answer is 6. Same thing, if I have, let's say 3 negative sticks, and I go and get another 2, how many, they were both negatives, how many do I have on the negative side? I have -5. That's really what we're doing. And we're going to do working with our number lines are another way to help kids realize what we do when we add positive and negatives. So here is my number line. Okay? Remember, 0 is always in the middle. And here's some positives. And so we've got negatives to the left, so -2, -3, -4. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Okay, now let's say I have a problem here that says I want to add 1 unit here. Okay, so I'm going to go starting at 0 because that's my beginning point. I'm going to add 1. Okay, the next thing says add 4 units. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Now it wants me to continue to add 5. We'll have to make my line a little bit bigger here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. What do I end up with once I add my 5 more units? Well, I go 5 to the positive because we're all positive here. And I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Where do I end up at? I end up at 10. Okay, so number lines can help us. Same thing is if I have a negative number, okay? With my negative numbers, let's say I have a -1. Let's say this is my starting point. I have a -1, and to that -1, I want to add a -3. I'm going to go to my left, because remember, my negatives are to the left. I'm going to add one negative unit, there's another -1, and there's one more negative. Where do I end up with? I end up at a -4 would be my answer. So number lines can help us visualize things, and it will really help us here as we go on through our lesson when we start adding positive and negatives. But let's go ahead and let's do a few of our straightforward examples here. Here I have a -4, a -13, and a -15, okay? They are all negative. That's the big thing. Even though there's a plus sign in front of it, notice directly in front of that number is a negative. So since they're all negatives, I'm simply going to just go ahead and add the number. So 5 plus 3 is 8. 8 plus 4 is 12. And then carry the 1, and end up with, my final answer is going to be 32, okay? I just added the numbers, and then I needed to look and add the negative sign in front of it to get my answer as -32, okay? Now, here is where it gets a little bit more intense when we start adding positive and negatives together, okay? We're going to go ahead, and what we're going to do is let's start off with a few problems on our number line here. So let's say my problem is I have 5 plus a -2. Okay, so what we're going to do is my green marker is going to represent my positive numbers. So it tells me right now I am starting at a +5. There's my 5. Now, to kind of think of it to help you is that negative sign is a direction. Okay, it tells me which way to go. Negatives, remember, are to the left of my zeros. So negatives mean I have to move left. Okay, how many am I adding? I'm adding a -2. So from my starting point here, this +5, I am moving to the left 2 negative units. Where do I end up at? Well, my answer is 3. Okay, a lot of you guys right off the bat will say, well, that's just 5 minus 2. You're right, but we're combining two integers together. One is positive and one is negative. Okay, so my answer in the end would be 3. Okay, how about if I start with a number, let's say is -2. Okay, so I have -2, and to that, I want to go ahead and let's add a +6 to that. Okay, because it's positive, remember all my positives are to the right of 0. So I need to move in the right direction, and I'm going to end up adding 6 units from my negative. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And I end up right here at 4. So my answer to this problem, -2 plus 4, my answer is 4. It's a +4. Okay, so number lines are a great way for us to visualize to see what's going on when I add positive and negatives. But that takes a while to have to draw out number lines and go back and forth. There is an easier way to help us solve these problems. And what we're going to simply do here is we're going to, your book says, subtract the absolute value of the addends. Okay, and then when you're done, give the sum of the signs of the addends with the larger ones. That's really wordy. That gets kind of complicated. So once again, we're going to go ahead and we're going to simply look at my numbers. Okay, don't worry about the signs. We notice right away I've got a positive and a negative. So whenever I have an opposite sign, I'm simply looking at the numbers. I'm going to take the big number, which in this case is a 5. Don't look at any of the signs. My other number is a 2. So I'm going to go and take the big number and subtract the little number. Okay? I don't care if it's positive or negative right now. I'm simply just looking at the numbers. Which one's bigger? Well, 5 is bigger than 2. So I'm going to take 5 and subtract 2. We know 5 minus 2 is 3. Now I'm going to start looking at the signs. Okay? Which is the sign of the bigger number? Well, we already said 5 was bigger than 2. So I'm going to look at the 5, and does it have a positive sign or a negative sign in front of it? It's positive. So I know my answer is going to be a positive 3 here. Okay? So let's do this problem here. Okay? Here I have two numbers. I have a negative 7 and a positive 7. Well, I'm just going to go ahead and subtract each other because they're opposite signs. What's 7 minus 7? 0. In this case, 0 is neither positive or negative, so my answer is simply 0. Okay, let's look at this example here. I've got 3 plus a negative 1. So I know I've got positive and negatives, so I'm going to have to take the big number. Don't look at the signs yet. Big number, subtract the little number. Well, 3 is bigger than 1, so 3 minus 1 is 2. Now look at the signs. My bigger number is a positive number, so my answer has to be a positive 2. Okay, take a look at this problem here. I've got negative 9 and a positive 4. They're both opposite signs. One's negative and one positive. So look at my numbers. Don't worry about the signs. My 9 is bigger than 4, so I'm going to go 9 minus 4, which is 5. Now look at the sign. My bigger number is a negative, so my answer has to be a negative 5. Okay? Okay, here we have 3 numbers. Okay, don't let that confuse you. I've got 8 plus a negative 11 plus 6. Okay, remember order of operations say addition and subtraction are all same power, so I go left to right. So we're going to go ahead and treat these numbers step by step. So here I've got 8 and 11. Well, 11 is bigger than the 8, so I'm going to go 11 minus 8, which is 3. My sign is bigger for the negative here. It's negative, so I know my answer is negative 3. Now I need to go negative 3 plus 6. Well, take 6 minus 3, which is 3. The sign of my bigger number is positive, so my final answer is going to be 3. So we're going to take order of operations and simply go left to right using the same method that we did up above here. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, let's do a couple problems here on the whiteboard, and then you're set to go for the day. I'm going to use green. It shows up a little bit better here. So let's see. I've got negative 11 plus a negative 3. What's the very first thing you should do? You always check the signs. This number is negative. This one is negative. So since they're both the same signs, I'm just going to add them together. 11 plus 3 is 14, and I use the sign that they both are, and it's negative. Okay, how about if I've got a negative 8 plus 2? Okay, I looked right away to see, we've got 2 different signs here. So I need to use the rule. Take the big number, subtract the little number, so 8 minus 2 is 6. Now go back and look at the sign. 8 is my bigger number, so what sign is it? It's negative. So my answer has to be negative 6. Okay, if I wanted to do a number line for this one, and that, here is 0. There's negative 1, negative 2, negative 3, negative 4, negative 5, negative 6, negative 7. Here's my negative 8. So I'm starting off my problem here at a negative 8. Okay, to that I'm adding 2. If I'm adding 2, do I go more to the left or do I go to the right? Well, remember, positives are always to the right of 0, so I've got to add to and go to the right 2 more units. And so where do I end up? My answer ends up at the -6. I hope this explains it a little bit better today. If you've got any questions, go ahead and email me or text me. Have a good day.